Hey guys, and welcome back to part 3 of our Sci-Fi and Substance Designer video series. My name is Javier Perez, and I'll be your instructor through this course. In this lesson, we'll be going over how to create a sci-fi ceiling from start to finish. We'll be covering techniques, thought processes, and general understanding of how the material is made. MSI was kind enough to supply me with a laptop to test out with Substance Designer. Thanks to the performance of the Intel Core i9 and RTX 2080, I'm able to work so much more quickly and efficiently and not have to worry about how complex my graphs are getting. And thanks to its thin and light design, I can make materials anywhere I go. I hope you'll enjoy this one and look forward to sharing my experiences with you. So let's get started. Alright, so to begin, I'm just gonna go ahead and start a new graph, calling it Ceiling 01. I'm going to bring in my base material and begin to delete all the unnecessary outputs that I'll be needing. I'm just doing the same setup that I've been doing on the previous materials, so I'm going in and just connecting just simple uniform colors and corresponding nodes to the outputs. So here I'm just making a uniform color to connect to all the different outputs, so it'll be a starting kind of connection as I begin my work. Making sure OpenGL is turned on, setting up some tessellation. So to begin, I'm just going to bring in a gradient and invert it and add a levels to it. This is going to give us the initial curve that we want on our surface. So as soon as I turn on the tessellation, you can kind of see we're getting like a curved effect here. Next up, I'm going to bring another gradient linear and with a curve, and I'm looking for a cool silhouette here. So I'm just bringing in the different dots, and this is going to be the inner kind of middle part that goes on this curved surface. So it's you'll see it once I start blending it with the other shapes, but we can actually go back into that curve and edit the silhouette if we need to. So I'm marrying that and then adding a levels here, and now you can kind of see the shape that we're getting. It's almost like a flat on the center, and then it's kind of sloping down to the edges. And I just want it to encompass the middle section of this texture, so I'm bringing in a shape, I'm doing a slight bevel, and I'm doing a levels, and then I'm blending those two together. So now you can see that we're just getting this central inner part a little bit. So now it's not encompassing the whole material, and you can kind of see here that it's it's right in the middle of the material. So, and here I'm just adjusting the size of it, making sure it's all good. It's essentially going to be a panel for our pipes down the line, so I just decided to make the middle frame early on. We're actually going to introduce those pipes that are going to go on top of this middle frame, and they're going to be overlaying on top of that piece. So I just went in and did a gradient linear, did a slight levels, and here I'm doing that crop technique that I've done in a few other videos, where I don't necessarily put in a shape to do the cropping. I'm mostly using the blend to crop out that shape for us. And here I don't want the inner section of these pipes to have some more repeating pipes. So there I actually do add a shape so we can subtract it, and then I blend it on top of that middle frame. I leave that area empty because we're actually going to add another bigger pipe. So we're just going to blend that in. So we're going to have like these two smaller pipes on the side and one central, sorry, not a pipe, more of a metal plate. So here, before we move forward to that part, I just decided to add some clamps on the actual pipes. So I just bring in a shape, and what I'm doing with that, I'm using the transforms to move them into place, and I'm adding a slight bevel at the very end. So this is more just so eyeballing it. I'm going to be able to move these guys into place once I start blending them in. They're just gonna be clamps that overlay on top of the pipes, so you can kind of see me messing with the blend modes to try to get something that looks like a pipe clamp or something. I'm just scaling it down so it fits better a little bit. Here I'm messing with the opacity, making sure they all look good. Bumping up the scale of the tessellation to make sure it's all good, and again going back and forth between the tessellation and the opacity to make sure everything is looking good. Again, I'm always framing stuff and naming things, that way we don't turn into gigantic spaghetti. And to give the pipes a little bit more detail, I wanted to give it some diagonal almost cut lines or some rivets. So here I just did a gradient linear and I bumped it up pretty high, and then I did a safe transform so we get that angular. I did a blend to subtract those new clamps so they don't appear. And then once I have that shape, I'm just adding it, blending it on top of the pipes. Here again, I'm just going in and this is that middle panel that we were talking about earlier. So I'm gonna use, yeah, so there you see me using the, again, the cropping feature, because I only want that inner, I wouldn't consider it a pipe, it's more like a curved metal plate that I just wanted in there. So it differentiates the middle plate from the pipes on the side, and I just blend that over, get some nice curved surface there. So I like what's going on with the pipes, but with the silhouette of that kind of first starting shape where we had the top of it kind of being flat and then it's sloping down, I wanted the pipes to have some sort of cut line in them, so it makes it feel like, you know, they're just not bending strange, like they were man-made and there was a cut made on those. So I just use an edge detect coming from that initial shape, and I do a small bevel and then I subtract it onto the pipes. So here I'm bringing in a shape, I'm doing a bevel, doing a transform, and moving it to the side. And these, what these are going to be are, eventually I'm going to add an emissive to these guys. So these are just going to be small little indents that will, at the end, will take shape into some emissive lights towards the edges of the material. So they're just, they're going to be small little indents, nothing too crazy. So next up, we're going to start working on the plates that the bags are going to sit on for this material. And I'm bringing in a shape, I'm doing a safe transform, and I'm just moving it to the side. What I'm creating here is more so a mass that will be cut into a square shape. I wanted the plates that the bags sit on to have the edges of the square cut out, so I don't want it to be a perfect square, but you can see here that I'm able to cut just little diagonal sections off of those guys. I added a slight bevel, bringing in a edge width, or sorry, a edge detect, and I'm doing this method so I can have an interior panel inside of this kind of larger panel. So we're just going to blend these two together. Just doing a non-uniform, a slight blur, and here I'm going to subtract it and just lower the opacity so it's not completely engraved in there. I'm doing a tile generator, so this is going to be where we're setting the amount of these panels that are going to be on the material. So I'm messing with a few different parameters to get it to where I like. And on this material in particular, we're going to have like 8 different panels. So I'm just messing with these guys, messing with the scale, making sure everything looks good. I did a transform because I wanted to shift it over to the side slightly, but I know that breaks the kind of the mirror of it. So I just decided to add a mirror grayscale and start connecting that. Here, I'm noticing that my height blend is acting a little weird. It's not necessarily looking how I want it to. So I'm messing with the different height offsets, with the contrast. I wanted that initial shape that we created in the beginning to be the highest peak, and I wanted these newly created panels to be the lowest peak. So I'm actually going back into that shape and then messing with the levels, seeing if I can get it to where I want it to. Again, I'm just moving them into place. This is a little bit of trial and error. I eventually find out that during the initial steps in the beginning, I actually missed plugging in a mask to one of, right here, you see me plugging in that mask to the pipe blend. So when I added the pipes on the initial metal panel shape that we made, I didn't add the mask, so that curve was affecting the whole material. But now you can see that once I added that, our height blend is working exactly how we want it to. So, and I'm just messing with the tessellation and making sure everything is looking how it's supposed to. Calling these guys bag frames. Eventually, I'm gonna have to edit these a little bit down the line, but for now, they're okay. So next we're going to work on the edges of this material, the frames. So when these two pieces meet together, there's going to be a middle frame where they connect to each other and they tile. So I'm doing the same process with the gradient linear and the curve to get a cool silhouette, and it's going to give us a pretty interesting shape on the edges. So here I'm just messing with trying to get a cool silhouette. Again, I can go ahead and change this later on, but this is what I found worked for me, and it's similar to another material that we'll work on down the line in this tutorial series. Once we have the silhouette where we want, just making a shape, doing a subtle bevel, moving it 50% over, and then rotating it. So here, or sorry, not rotating it here, but here you can kind of see the height information where it's peaking kind of a higher white on the edges, and in the middle it's more of a grayscale, so you get kind of that nice slope. And there we go. So you see how it's almost like it's higher on the edges, and it's just like a more interesting shape than just having the frame just being straight wide across and just having it pretty flat. So at this point I go ahead and save, just making sure we don't lose our work. So on that initial middle metal panel that we did, I wanted to add some indents into it, so I just go ahead and add a shape, a bevel, and then I'm just moving into place, but I'm also going to do a mirror so it's symmetrical on each side. I'm going to go ahead and do a blend here, and I'm getting a mask from that newly created edge frame to subtract those pieces so it doesn't go across the whole material. But here I'm just subtracting it, and now we have a little bit more interesting shape on that middle panel, so it's not just completely flat. So I want to give that middle panel a little bit more detail. So I go ahead and add a tile generator, and I start messing with a few parameters to get a mask that I'm liking, but then I also blend it with that newly created shape that we indented. So now we can kind of see that pattern that it's giving us. I'm going to plug it into a tile generator. This is just some kind of trial and error that I'm working on here. I realized that the tile generator isn't necessarily going to work, so I end up deleting it and adding a tile sampler. That way we can bring in this newly created pattern that we made into our mask map threshold, and now this detail that we're creating in the tile sampler is only apparent on that new mask that we created. So now we have these small little indentations, and I just go ahead and subtract that into the original metal panel. It gives us just a nice little detail onto that panel. So from here, just like we did with those emissive lights on the side, I'm actually going to add a light in the center of the material. This one's pretty simple. We just go ahead and add a shape, a subtle bevel, a slight blur, and then we're doing a height blend, so it's a little higher than the rest of the material on the height values, so that's why it's sticking out just a bit. But I also go ahead and I'm going to do an edge detect on it, subtract it from the original shape. That way we're getting an an interior kind of mask. That way we can subtract it, and we're getting more of like kind of a lamp shape now. So we have the frame, but we also have the bulb in the middle. It's a little high right now, so I actually go back into the height offset and lower it a little bit so it's not extruding too much. And we're gonna start giving the edge frames a little bit more detail. So the frames that were created for the tops and the bottoms are cool. I just want to add almost like we're taking away from the middle section of those guys, so you can see me subtracting just a standard shape, and now we're getting kind of a cool silhouette there. So we almost have like a lip now, but we also have this indented area on the frame, so it's going to look nice when we actually tile this material and they kind of stick together. Continuing on, I want to add a pattern to that new indented area. So to keep it like to the sci-fi theme, I just go ahead and add a polygon, just transform it a little bit. I add a pretty heavy blur because with the levels I can mess with, we get some nice curved corners here. And I'm just messing with it to try to find something I like. Here I'm going to bring in two different transforms, and these are going to be two inputs that I'll plug into a tile sampler. And here I'm going kind of process of elimination and just messing with different parameters and seeing what kind of things I'm going to get. But before I do that, I actually bring in a shape and use that as a mask map threshold, because I only want this pattern to be repeating on a certain mask area. That way it can fit perfectly into that new indented area. So here it's just kind of messing with the different parameters and try to get something I like. It's a process of trial elimination, so I'm going back and forth and seeing what I can change here. So there we go. I start getting something I like. I wanted that repeating pattern, and I bring in a transform and just scale it up in a little bit, and then I bring another transform, I rotate it 180, and then I move it up so it is tiling up and down. And there we go. I'm subtracting it from that interior indent that we made. It's kind of hard to see in the 3D mode, but once I take down the scale, you can kind of see what's going on here. I realized that the transform that I did, the rotation here, wasn't necessarily what I had originally, so I'm just going back in and rotating it, making sure that the edges of the triangles on left and right are pointing up. So I want to give these guys a little bit more detail, so I want to add a lip to that newly created shape. So here I'm just using the same technique, using an edge detect and then blending that with the original shape. And then I'm just doing a addition to this guy, so you can see me messing with it here. I originally do subtract, but once I change it to add, you can kind of see we have this like nice lip going on here. Always going into my 3D mode, changing the scale, making sure everything's looking good, always making sure that it's reading correctly how I want it to. And of course, always putting stuff in frames and naming it accordingly. So there's still some more details I want to add on this guy. I'm gonna add like a trapezoidal shape, and I'm just going to repeat it, and I'm going to use it on the edge of this new frame. So now that we had the indentation, the middle section is kind of being pushed in, but you'll notice that we have that lip now, and I just wanted to add like a cool tiling pattern on that guy. So I'm just going in, doing the trapezoid, doing a blur levels. I'm using a tile generator just to tile it a few times, and I'm messing with a few parameters just so I can get the look I want. Once I have it to something that I like, I'm going to use a mirror grayscale, because the way it's tiling right now is kind of off a little bit. You'll notice in the map that it's not necessarily all symmetrical. So I just go ahead and do a mirror grayscale and invert the axis, so now it feels like it's all cohesive. I'm going in and doing a subtract, but once I do that, I notice that it's going across the whole map. So what I have to end up doing is going back to where we were adding those initial shapes of the edge frames. And I'm just going to create a mask here. So I'm just bringing the mask from the height blend, plugging into a histogram scan, and using that black and white input. And now you'll notice that it's just appearing on those frame edges that we were talking about. So this part, we're actually going to start adding a basket of cables onto this material. So to start off, we're just going to do a shape, do an edge detect, we're going to subtract it and then blend it on top of each other. And now we're getting this almost like a cable runner where the cables are they sit on, and we added a nice lip to it. But then I go back, use that same mask from the frame so we can cut out the tops and the bottoms, because I don't want this basket to intersect through the whole material. And I'm just messing with the levels here because I want it to stick higher than the initial shapes that we made for the bags, those panels that we made earlier. Just gonna name it cable basket. We're not blending it just quite yet, but because we still have a few things that we want to do here. So here's where we're actually gonna add the cables, and I'm gonna use the that method where we use the masking and the blending to mask two different shapes of cables. So you see me doing pretty much the same 3 node graph, but on one of them the cables are tiled a little bit more. So you kind of see me doing the masking here, and then I just mask the edges off. So the smaller cables are on the left side and the bigger cables on the right side. Here I'm creating some different masks that I'll need eventually, but I used it so we can overlay these cables onto this basket. And here I'm using the transforms from the original kind of nodes that I created to move them into place. I want to add some brackets onto these guys so it makes it feel like those cables are being held by something. So if we think of it as a ceiling, those cables without brackets probably fall on the ground. So I'm adding just a pretty simple shape. Added a couple circles, tiled them onto a rectangle, and then here I'm doing a tile sampler and I'm just tiling it a little bit. But I'm going to bring in that mask that we created earlier from the basket, plugging it into that threshold again. So now it's only masked out there, and here I'm doing a blend so they go on top of those cables. Here I'm just moving it up a little bit because this is where we'll actually add it into our material, and voila, we just bring the height offset kind of down a little bit, and there we go. So now we have a new cable basket. So if you want, you can go ahead and mirror it on each side, do whatever you want. I just decided to leave it on one side to keep it asymmetrical. And now we're actually going to start the process of creating the bags for these guys. So I'm just going to use a crystal to get some nice wrinkles here, doing a histogram scan, or sorry, range, doing a levels, blurring it a little bit, some directional warp, just pretty standard stuff, doing adding a Perlin noise, setting some intensities here. So this is gonna pretty much be the baseline for our bags. I'm starting off with pretty much just a base wrinkles, and we're gonna start blending in some different stuff in here afterwards. Doing some more blurring, doing a transform, and then these kind of values of the grays might give us something we're not really looking for. So what I did was I just added a uniform color of white, and I'm slowly subtracting it from this guy. That way, this is what we're going to be blending on top of our initial material here. So I'm just moving all this stuff into place. Adding that. And I notice when I blend it, it's actually adding it to the whole thing. So again, I'm using that same cropping area technique on the blend, but again, it's still not cropping everything. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back to where we created the initial frames for these bags. And I'm actually gonna add some different levels and histogram ranges to create some different masks that we need. So I'm just going ahead and doing a levels, doing a histogram scan, making sure we get the right mask for these guys. So I'm just using a couple of masking techniques here, trying to get those interior panels only, not the exterior ones. So just kind of multiplying, doing edge detects and subtracting stuff. And there we go. So that mask right there is just for the interior of those frames, or sorry, for those bag holders. So now that I plugged that in, with the combination of the cropping area and that mask that we just plugged in, those wrinkles are only appearing on those two bags now. So the bags are looking a little sharp on the edges. So what I want to do is I want to add some poofiness to them, make them feel a little bit more rounder. I'm taking that same mask and I'm just blurring it slightly, doing a levels here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this to a bevel node, but I'm going to actually bump up the smoothness of it again. And I'm just going to use that same mask and then just plug this guy in. But again, what I noticed was because the cropping area isn't essentially the same as the last one, it was applying that poofiness all over the material. So a quick way, instead of having to redial in those values for the cropping area, I just basically duplicated that blend node and replugged stuff in. Going back in and just making sure everything is named correctly. We're actually going to add some more wrinkles on this guy because I felt like we lost a little bit of them from the original work that we did. So again, just using that same mask, doing a Perlin noise here with a multi-directional warp. Gonna plug these guys in, and again, I'm actually duplicating that blend mode again because I know the cropping areas are, the values are correct. I don't want to have to constantly keep trying to crop it in that blend node, so I'm just duplicating that. I want the bags to have kind of a cool pattern on them, so I just go ahead and do a square shape, a non-uniform, and just tile it a bunch, and I'm just gonna overlay it on this guy with a copy and then just lower the opacity. Super subtle on the height, but you can notice that even that subtle value, it's giving us quite a bit information on the height and the normal. So here, I want to start introducing the straps that are going to hold these guys down. I'm going to just go bring in a shape, move it around, do a transform, and I'm basically moving it into place where I know the bags are going to be. I want the straps to have some sort of almost like threading on it. So I add a gradient linear and I bump up the value of that guy. And then I blend it on top of that initial square shape. So while I'm creating these straps, what I'm going to do with this guy right here with the shapes and just moving him to place, what I'm doing with these guys is I'm going to subtract them from those straps because I want them to have this negative space, because eventually once we add in the straps, we're going to add in some clips. So I'm moving them in the place where I think the clips would be good, and I don't want any of the strap to be showing up. Again, just doing some more blending. What I'm doing here is I'm just doing a blur grayscale with those newly created straps. And what I'm doing here is I'm using that blur's grayscale and I'm just subtracting it because we can do this cool kind of trick where if we mess with the opacity, once I connect it, you can kind of see what will happen. We get this nice indentation, even though we don't have the straps on top right now. being able to subtract it with a blur, you can kind of see it's giving us the impression of where the straps would be. So once we actually add in the straps, it's gonna make it feel like they're actually getting like pushed down and pulled. Here I'm doing a pre-blur before I actually add in the straps. The pre-blur gives us the ability to conform to the shape of the underlying bags. So I'm just using the same mask, just doing a subtle blur. And here is where I'm actually going in and adding the straps finally. Again, using the same blend that we have the crop values correct. Just going in and making sure everything is looking good. So you can kind of see with that initial, the indent we did with the blur, it almost looks like those straps are getting pulled and pushing it down, really holding it into place. So on the frame, I noticed that the straps are kind of going almost like into just the edges of the bags, which I didn't really like. So I want to add almost some holes on the side of where those straps are to make it feel like those straps are kind of going into somewhere, or, you know, just make it feel like they're just not sitting there or doing some weird things. So I'm getting a bunch of different masks and combining them to get just the edges of the of where the straps and the frames meet up. So I'm going in and doing a tile sampler here after I've created the mask from blending the different the straps and also the frames where these bags are being held. I'm using that as a mask map threshold, and once I have that, I basically can create any sort of shape in the tile sampler and it'll just appear where I want it to. So here you can kind of see that we have those impressions now, but I'm not necessarily liking where they're sitting because they're protruding into the actual bags. So it's a lot of, here you can kind of see me mess with a bunch of different settings, trying to get them to kind of be pushed more towards the edge. It's a lot of trial and error. Eventually I find out that I have to go back to the original shape of the frames that we created early on and mess with the mask. So here I'm still trying to figure out what to do with these guys. Going back and forth, trying some different things, seeing what's going on. Keep getting the same results, which is a little bit frustrating. So it's a lot of trial and error on this guy. Sometimes you have to realize that, you know, you might not be able to get what you're looking for with the current kind of nodes that you're messing with. Sometimes you really do have to realize that because these masks are being created from stuff that was done early on, it might help to actually go back into your graph and see if there's anything that you can tweak very slightly or anything that might affect the shape. So here I realize this is where I actually go back and I'm seeing like, okay, well, this frame, and here as I move the edge width, I can clearly see that the shape of the bag was just slightly a little bit too big, and I just mess it to the point where, you know, the bag isn't being encompassed by those indentations anymore. So once I get all that situated, just add a frame and continuing on. So we're actually going to start making the clips that are going into those negative spaces in the straps. So just doing a bunch of different shapes here, doing a bunch of different subtractions and doing edge detects. I just found some reference online of some cool looking clips. So I just did a square with a circle, do like a crescent, like half circle, and then just do an edge detect, take off the tiling mode, because with these guys, I'm actually just going to hand place them with two transformation 2Ds. I'm going and doing a capsule here because it's going to be the clip is a little bit it's mostly made up of 3 different shapes. So I got this capsule, that half circle, and then a small little clip that's combining these 2 guys together. So I basically just make this capsule, transform it, do an edge detect, do a non-uniform, or I delete that non-uniform, and I'm just moving these 2 transforms together. I'm blending these 2 together and just putting them side by side, making sure they're the correct size. So I want to bring in another shape that'll almost make it feel like it's one whole clip, bringing those 2 together. So just bringing in a shape, gonna use a trapezoid, rotate it, do a non-uniform, and then just move it into place by blending it on top of this guy. I actually do a height blend instead of a regular blend here. Scale it, just move it, eyeball it. Want that clip to feel a little higher than the rest. So, and here I'm actually adding these 2 transforms, and this is where I'm actually manually placing these guys. So those negative spaces that we included in the original straps, I'm actually just going to place them where those guys are. So I'm looking for where that strap has been kind of taken out. Just moving the second one down to its designated area. Just naming it clips. And cool, we're pretty much almost done with I'm pretty sure we're done with the height map here. Next up, I'm actually going to create, just how I've been doing with the other floor materials, we're going to create a chipping mask. So this is pretty much the same setup that we have been doing, where we're taking our ambient occlusion and we're just inverting it so it just grabs the edges. We're adding some noises to break up those edges. And what this is going to give us is it's going to give us the ability to use it as a mask. That way we're able to scratch off some of the paint on the material when we're creating our albedo. So here you see me just doing moisture noise, quantizing it, doing histogram scans, blending it with our inverted ambient occlusion, doing some more inverts, blending it with some more ambient occlusions at different levels. And here I want to add some more detail on this mask, so I just go ahead and bring in a scratch generator. I've been using it for the other 2 floors, so kind of keep the values pretty consistent from the last 2 videos. So just want to add a little bit more granular detail on top of this chipping mask, so I just add it in there. You can kind of see the scratches coming through a little bit. And I know that I'm going to use this mask throughout the whole material, but because it's essentially you're chipping off metal, I don't want the chipping effect to be applied on the bags or the cables. So what I'm doing is I'm adding these blends, and I'm looking for masks that will be used on that I could subtract from that chipping mask. So here I'm just going ahead and just adding different blends. And again, I actually went back and found one of those blends with the correct cropping area, because I know, again, I didn't want to have to retype in those values. So it was nice that I just had to duplicate one of those blends with the correct cropping values. Here, I'm going to create a mask for just the interior of the cables. So I'm looking for a mask that'll give me something that's just affecting the cables and not the brackets. So like there, I found something that's pretty good. I'm just bringing it over, subtracting it. And now I have this chipping mask that only will affect the metal and paint areas and not the bags and cables. Add some comments to make sure I remember remember what these guys are doing. Doing some final kind of naming on this stuff. So we're gonna actually start creating the albedo. We're gonna leave that chipping mask alone for now. We're not plugging into anything, but we're actually gonna start our albedo process. So like I've been doing in the last videos, it's pretty streamlined where I do the albedo, then the roughness and metallic, and I'm just going ahead and choosing base values for this guy. I'm referencing my finished graph, and when you see me using the eyedropper, I'm just going ahead and grabbing values from said graph. And all it really is we're just going ahead and adding uniform colors and blending it, but we're actually going through the graph and creating these masks. So here you see me bringing a histogram scan and just looking for a mask for those interior pipes. So I'm just going in, and the connectors that I'm creating, they're I'm making them pretty long and kind of towards the bottom. I just don't want spaghetti going all over the place. So I make sure to, when I'm creating these guys, I'm making them at the bottom and just giving them as much space as possible. I noticed this mask isn't giving me just the pipes, so I'm gonna try and find something that'll give me just the pipes. And I'm able to find that, so there we go. But now I notice that the frames are being affected, so I'm going back into where the frames are, and I just subtracted that mask there. So now it's only affecting the pipes now. Going ahead and naming everything accordingly. Next up, we're gonna do the cuffs. Pretty straightforward. Just going again, finding the mask. From here on out, it's gonna be just pretty much finding the correlating mass and just messing with those values. Sometimes we're gonna run into issues where certain things need to be subtracted or added onto said mask to get the colors popping up where they need to be. So sometimes you'll see me doing that. But again, I'm literally just copying the same blends from the previous, and I'm just keep on adding on to our graph. Again, you always see me when I'm creating these connection points to the new to the blends, the connections. I'm definitely dragging them all the way to the bottom and then all the way to the right. It's a lot easier when I do this, because that way it's easier to follow the connections back. And here's one of those instances where I just I took away that frame from the original those kind of frames that are holding the bags. But yeah, like I was saying, for me, it's a lot easier to have these connection points a lot cleaner. So I'm almost like layering them on top of one, or just adding to the bottom. So I bring them lower and lower. That way they're not intertwining with the other connection points. That way it's a lot easier for me to just circle them back if I need to. Again, that was another instance where I had to take the mask of the edge frames and subtract it so it doesn't affect the interior panels of the bags. So on this guy, wherever the bags aren't sitting, we're gonna have like a nice metal plate, and I'm just messing with the roughness values there and messing with the lighting and making sure that's giving us the correct reflectance value. So I go ahead, I want to add some stickers on these guys, and what I do to quickly get this like shape I like, I go back to when we created that pattern for the indentation of the edge frames, those triangles that are repeating. I basically just grabbed that small graph and created a one-off, and then I'm taking the mask from those frames where the bags are sitting, And I'm just adding it with a blend so they only appear on those guys. So you can see here is just me adding these guys, messing with the values, making sure they're all good. Want the stickers to give a little bit different reflectance value to the metal so they feel more like a plastic sticker. And I want them on each side, top and bottom, so I just do a mirror grayscale so they both show up on the top and bottom. And again, I mean, we're going left to right and almost this Photoshop mentality. So as we're basically building the albedo the same way we're building the height map from left to right. So when I was creating the height map, any new piece was just being added on top. So that's why when we're doing this way, the colors are just being added on top. So there's no instance where, oh man, we got to go back and like put the color underneath a certain area or something like that. With the mask that we're creating, it's really quick and easy to find the things we're looking for, and just super easy to create the mask that we're looking for as well. So here I'm actually doing the colors for the cables now, moving the final outputs to the right a lot because we're just gonna keep going through this process. So here with that cable basket that we added earlier, or that we created earlier, was a good opportunity to use that for our albedo. So now we have those masks ready to go when we're actually creating our albedo, which is really nice. So didn't have to do too much work there besides having to choose the correct values. I'm using the crop function again to just bring in some yellow on this guy. I don't add a roughness or metallic values on this one in particular because I want them, because I'm just changing the albedo on a part of the cable. I want it to have the same metallic and roughness read, so I'm not necessarily gonna just create duplicates of those nodes. Again, bringing in the mask that we created from the basket, making sure they're all good. Here, this was an instance where I actually had to create a new mask because I was looking for something that'll give me just the brackets by themselves. So I had to go in and find something from the existing masks that we had from the brackets. It was just finding two that we could add together to get the mask I'm looking for. And there we go. Now we have the brackets and the metal looking pretty much the same. So here you see me grabbing earlier color nodes, and that's because what I was doing there was the brackets and the edges of that basket are the same types of metal. So if I were to change one color, I wanted to affect both those pieces consecutively. So that's why I just did that really quickly. Up next, I'm just doing the middle interior panel, so making it feel a little bit more like metal. It's a little dull right now. I always wanted that center kind of plate where that light is, that circular light is. I want it to feel like metal, so here I'm just rotating the light to make it to make sure like the values are correct. And sometimes I actually circle back to my height map and I'm seeing how things were built to make sure I'm actually creating my albedo the right way and making sure I'm not missing a piece. So I go back into my height and I'm just looking at which, basically the way I'm building the height map is the same way I'm building the albedo. I know I'm reiterating that, but sometimes I go back and, like, for example, after I did the basket, I did go and add an interior panel on the height map for the middle section. So just following that suit and just doing the same thing for the albedo. This is where I'm actually choosing the colors of the interior edge frames. So I want them to be a cool looking blue. So again, just using the mask from when we created this piece in the height map. Making sure, naming everything accordingly. Duplicating. Just continuing, moving forward. I'm adding that pattern that's sitting in the indent of the frame, on the edge frame. I'm just making it a tad darker from the blue. So the darker color makes it feel like it's being indented more so. Moving just some connectors into place so it's not getting too sloppy or too crazy. And this is where we're introducing the lips of that pattern. I want them to make them a shiny metal. During this process, I realized that the mask that we initially created for this guy was kind of weird. We're getting like, you'll notice I'm kind of zooming in here, and I look at the mask and it looks kind of off. Like the bottom of that lip is missing some sort of information there, so I end up going back into where I created it and I'm just starting to mess with it, and I noticed the edge roundness gives us a fuller mask that we're looking for. So not only does it fix the height map early on, but now it's helping us accentuate the color that we want to introduce into that piece. So when I start creating the colors for the bags, I am actually going back to where we created the bags, and I'm looking for that one of those blend nodes that have the correct cropping areas, because I just don't want to have to input those over and over again. So I basically just duplicated the blend to make sure the cropping area, and the combination of me having those values inputted into the cropping area on top of the mask gives us the colors right where we want them. So not too much of crazy work or anything like that. I noticed when I added the straps, we weren't getting like the full color range on this guy, and it was because of when I duplicated the initial blend from the height map, I realized that I didn't change the opacity back to fully opaque. Back when it was being used in the height map, there's instances where I needed to be a lower opacity, but here on the color I want to be completely opaque, so like full 100%. So here I'm actually just going back and making sure that that situation isn't happening earlier on and I didn't miss anything. So far so good. So I'm just going in and continuing. Again, this is one of those instances where I didn't add a roughness or metallic on the strap color because I wanted it to use the underlying bag roughness and metallic values, so I didn't feel like I needed to add those nodes again. They're fabrics, so I just assumed like keep them pretty similar. Here I'm just doing the metallic on the clips. Again, just grabbing the newly created latest shape that we created and just using that as a mask. And here we're finally going to introduce that chipping mask that we created, the one I told you guys to kind of leave off for a second. I'm just plugging in these values. It's giving us some information, but it's super subtle right now because when I created the chipping mask, I left it like kind of at a low opacity, so we are getting the chipping effect that we're looking for. But you'll see me kind of go back and mess with it a little bit more. The clips didn't have a full like white mask, so I go ahead and I went back and did a histogram scan on that guy. So we added the chipping, but I also wanted to differentiate the chipping and the scratches. So what I did was I just grabbed that mask for the scratches that we added onto the chipping, and I wanted to differentiate the colors for that guy. So I'm just choosing different roughness and metallic values for that guy. So that way the chipping and the scratches just feel a little bit different from each other. Again, I'm just, at this point, I'm circling the light a little bit. But I noticed when I added the scratches as its own mask, I noticed that it's affecting the bags and the rubber, kind of how I didn't want the chipping to affect the bags and the rubber cables. Same thing is happening here. So I'm actually creating new masks so they don't affect that. And just use the same kind of mask that we've been using to create the albedos to just subtract it from those areas. So this is where we start getting some dirt into our material, and it's going to give us a really nice reflectance like variation on this guy. So I've been using this dirt node in the past two videos, so all you have to do is plug in your ambient, your normal, and your curvature smooth from a normal. And when I plugged in the normal, I realized that I had left it at a really low it was like at a 5. I usually put like my normal map at like a value of 20 or something lower just to really push it, and it gives the dirt node a little bit more information to work with, and on top of that it makes the material just pop a little bit more. So here I'm just messing with the values of the dirt node, plugging that dirt node into the mask of these blends, making sure all these values are correct. You can kind of start seeing in the 3D viewport that we're starting to get some nice variation on the surfaces now. Just messing with the lighting direction and just constantly rotating the light. Lastly, for my albedo, I always like to add a curvature on top, so I just do a curvature smooth from the normal, do a gradient map because we're turning a color into a grayscale. Or sorry, a grayscale into a color to overlay on top of the albedo. And then I'm taking the quantized moisture noise from when we were creating our chipping, and I realized that it would be a really nice overlay on our final kind of roughness output, just to put out a low opacity on an add sub and just see the kind of effects it gets. Go ahead and name our roughness variation. And the last thing we're going to do here is we're actually going to bring in our emissive maps. So what I'm doing here is I want to add some sort of information on the emissive. So what I end up doing is I'm just doing a gradient linear, and I'm just setting the value super high. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to blend it with the mask that we created for the lights. I had to take that emissive light and subtract it from the frame, the edge frame earlier on. So that's what I did there. And then I'm just adding those newly created information onto the emissive here. Bringing the bulb in and then just adding that as well. So now we have that plugged into a new output called the emissive. Once I have that, I realize I want to take this emissive mask and actually add it into our roughness and metallic. So I want the roughness to make it feel like it's glass where that light is, where those lights are. So I make sure to just set a uniform color to black, and I just use that mask and just set that on the roughness. Finally, I'm just going in, naming all my final outputs, making sure everything is looking good. Taking one last look at the graph as a whole, moving the sun direction around. I turned on the iRay really quick just to see the kind of results we're getting. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. Put it on a plane. You guys can kind of see the way it's reacting with the ceiling. Make sure to save. Hope you guys learned something. This one was pretty intense. If you guys want to get a more detailed look at the graph, it's up on the ArtStation store on my page. So go ahead and take a look at it. I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.